Let's go! My God, is in Gator! It's gonna be a football game tonight now. No doubt. It's gonna be a football game here. Okay. I done been here before. All right, let's go, baby.
9. Rushing 4, ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, and it's still on the ground. Picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
Alabama back on top of the college football world.
Ladies and gentlemen, football to the max.
Your host, Sean Garmer, Gary Vaughn, and Randy Isbell.
Hello and welcome to another Football to the Max, and we are going to be one person short today as Randy was busy with a few things and could not be on the show, but we are talking about more free agency stuff. There's some NFL rule changes that the competition committee and Roger Goodell are hoping to put in place for the 2016 season. We'll talk about those. And, of course, we're continuing our off-season analysis with the ending of the NFC South with the New Orleans Saints and the Atlanta Falcons being profiled today. So, but Gary is with me. So, how are you doing, Mr. Gary?
Doing good, man. Just enjoying all this great March Madness going on, and we'll talk more about that on Monday. But it's kind of fun to get a chance to really see what you really screwed up on and some of the things you got right. So it's been a chore, just getting through all these games because you're nervous about your picks getting to be the ones that are correct. Right. But besides that, man, just partying down every weekend. And I'm not talking about me partying. I'm talking about my daughter. She seems to have a birthday party every weekend now. And, man, she parties more than I do. It's kind of sad. But that's okay. It's good.
Gotta love it. That's why you have those kids, so they can party.
Yeah.
At your expense. Yeah.
True. I have to buy the gifts.
Yeah, Anaya has been, she's starting spring break, and her ballet is going to have from like 8 to 6, basically like a little school for them, and they're even going to get to go see Zootopia one of the days and stuff. So,
wow, that's
I'm
awesome.
jealous. I haven't even gotten to see that movie yet.
I know, man. Jeez.
So, so she's going to have a lot of fun next week, and a little bit more time for me to rest. Normally I have to go pick her up by 3:30, so I get until 6 o'clock to
there you go.
Pick her up. So, good things all around. But we're obviously here to talk about some football. No one wants to hear us keep talking about personal stuff, I'm sure. So, we might as well get into these rule changes that the NFL wants. The competition committee wants to outlaw all chop blocks. Now, the league themselves just want to kind of mess around with the wording because they're not big fans of some of the just the wording that's involved, but they don't want to totally take out everything, it seems like. So, what do you think? I've never been a big fan of... I understand why they have to do it, especially at the running backs doing it on the linemen coming through and whatever, but how do you feel on the chop block thing?
The wording is what it is. I think that you got to be, careful from making the game too soft. And what I mean by too soft is completely eliminating anything that even alludes to a chop block. That's still going too far. I think, though, that you do need to make sure you're protecting your players. They're doing the right thing when it comes to, injuries, when it comes to the head, brain injuries. Of course, that's the reason why. But they need to make sure they're protecting their players or their legs as well. And so that's why I think the chop blocking has become an issue. We've seen plenty of players go out with knee injuries and various other lower leg injuries. So they're going to try to protect their players that way as well. And I think that's fine and dandy. But like I said, there's got to be the happy medium. And if they're not happy with what they got now, I'm okay with them kind of cracking down a little bit. But we can't get to the point where, these running backs are completely just getting destroyed because they have no way to block these defensive linemen. That's just, to me, then it gets to be a little bit too pretentious.
Yeah, and you're right about that. I mean, I think the chop block can obviously not be completely eliminated because you're taking away something that the offense uses as a strategy. I think, from the lineman's standpoint, I think you can maybe, but you're going to have to make some tough calls on that end as far as what you do with the wording. I agree with you. If they take it all out, man, that's a lot to take out there and make them change. But you make the defense have to change what they do every year. So it would sort of be fair if you make the offense kind of have to make some changes as well, which wouldn't, like I said, it would sort of be fair if you did get to do it that way. So another thing is they will not be making any changes to the catch rule. They are going to go out of their way to publicly educate people on how it is officiated and all that. Why? Why not make it more clear what a catch is?
Because it goes against their. Well, I was going to make it a conspiracy theory. Maybe I shouldn't.
It's okay. You can make them.
It may go against some judgments that they want to go in favor of the NFL. And what I mean by that is the NFL every year has a plan. Now, I'm not saying that they have certain teams that they plan to win. What I'm saying, though, is every year they have a plan system of, we've got to make sure that we have equality, make sure these teams go well, and do a great job. But once we get into the playoffs, if we feel like one of the teams that could win that may not continue on, and it may be a slaughterhouse in the Super Bowl, we're going to eliminate that if we can. And if a call comes down to it and it makes it possible, we may do that. Because the reason I say that, and people are going to be like, "Good God, Gary, what are you coming up with here?" My point in all this is, once it comes down to it, they have to call New York. The instant replay goes, the officials look at it, it goes upstairs. When it goes upstairs, as in the Des Bryant catch, I think even the Calvin Johnson catch as well, those were called in New York. New York makes those decisions. Well, New York may have an agenda. They may not. I don't know. But I think that's why they're so adamant against not changing this rule. They're so adamant about not making it clear. I think they like the little gray area that they have. That way they can sway it to whatever side they feel like is best.
I think not only that, I think that obviously makes us have to talk about things. You make everything clear, then everybody's going to know what a catch is, and when they don't call it that, it's somebody did something wrong, and the referees don't know what they're doing, and all that kind of stuff. So, there's quite a few different things that come into play with that. I'm more in favor of them just tell us what a catch is. It's the same rule for everybody, and whatever. But,
yeah, I know. I totally get what you're coming from, and people are going to think I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm not. I just really think, just like any other sport, there's a little bit of conspiracy there to be, understood because of the fact that this is a business, and if they can do anything they can do to make sure the business is successful, they're going to do it, and that's why I have kind of that thought process.
So they've also proposed the horse collar rule be tweaked so that perhaps to include when a player pulls at a nameplate just below the shoulder pads, meaning the officials could throw a horse collar flag even if shoulder pads aren't pulled because the effect of the ball carrier is the same.
That's a little bit
So basically,
touchy.
instead of pulling the
Yeah.
actual collar, you pull the nameplate, which if you pull it a little bit, it does have some give to it.
Yeah, that's
That
my
would
thing.
also be considered a horse collar.
The give is what makes me not want to give it the same exact penalty as a horse collar. I think if you want to give a 5-yard flag for, maybe, I don't know what you want to call it. I don't know if I'd call it a horse collar, but I'd call it, something else. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know a phrase for it. My point in this is there's a difference between pulling a jersey and then grabbing onto a collar, just like me and you standing in the same room, Sean. If I pull you by the back of your shirt, right between your shoulder blades, and pull you back, that's going to, of course, pull you back, but not to the full force of me grabbing the neck of your shirt and just yanking you. That's a completely different, there's a difference in violence there. And that reason is because of the horse collar it's in fact what it is, a collar pull. And that is very dangerous because the player's complete weight comes back. When you pull with just the jersey, they fall back, but I think also the player has some gravity and has some give and can still lean forward even with that pull. Whereas the horse collar itself, there is no gravity forward. They have no choice but to go backwards.
Yes, you're right about that. I think that's a tough one. It's kind of like the chop block thing. I'd have to see what they actually decide to do with that.
Yeah. And I get where they're coming from. And it is, it is a serious thing that, those injuries that players have gotten from being horse collared are very serious. I'm just saying that I just don't believe that the jersey is enough because a jersey has give to it. If it didn't have any give, I mean, if these jerseys were skin tight and you pull a little bit of a jersey and the guy flies the other way, then okay, maybe we're talking something here, but those jerseys aren't skin tight.
So the another one that they're planning on doing here is the Ravens. Not a whole lot's going to change with instant replay, but the Ravens want 3 challenges per team and expanded review options, whatever that means.
Yeah.
I've kind of been in favor of the 3 challenges per team myself.
3 challenges isn't necessarily too much, but I think the way the NFL has it organized right now is to make sure this game keeps going, and it also doesn't. It kind of puts it gives the coach some say into the referees and what they're doing and saying, hey, you need to look at this, you need to look at that. But, I think they're still trying to eliminate the game from going long or from long pauses. And 3, you may have 3 major long pauses in a game. I'm not sure the NFL wants that. I think the 2 works just fine for me personally. But the expanded stuff that they're talking about here and expanding replay, I think they're alluding towards penalties and maybe some other things that we're not really thinking about. Maybe even clock management. Maybe they need to point out things to the referees, and that's why they want that expanded. So I think that it could be good, though. I kind of like that, but once again, Randy said it on this podcast before. If you start reviewing, penalties, it could be a big issue because then that becomes so tedious.
No, you're right about that. It not only tedious, but it's just puts too much onus on the referees to want to correct their own calls, and then that's another issue entirely. So I don't think you want that necessarily. The rule that we talked about last time with the quarterback being hit low, including driving heads or shoulders into the lower body. That is going to be what it is, I think. The Chiefs want to tweak the rules so that quarterbacks cannot fall to the ground, get up, and then basically what Peyton Manning did. So they can't fall to the ground, get up, and throw a forward pass. What do you think about that? I think if they're not touched, what's the big deal?
Yeah, that's my thing.
You're letting people continue on with a catch if they're not touched.
Hmm.
So what's the difference?
Exactly. I completely agree. There shouldn't be a problem with that. I know where they, could say, well, it's just not fair because, the defensive line or whoever on the defense thinks that the player's down, so they stop and they don't know what to do because the rules hit by hitting the quarterback. If they're afraid to hit the quarterback because they think he's down and he's not, blah blah blah. I get those points. I definitely do, but your players should also kind of understand that hey, when the whistle's blown, he's down. When it's not, he's not. So they need to pay attention to that as well. I get the argument in a way, but in a way, I'm like, I don't agree with it. I think that the quarterback, until touched, has the right to get back up.
I agree. The Redskins want no overtime periods in preseason, and I say, why the hell is that not in right now?
I'm surprised it's not. And I don't have a problem with this either. Really, what are these preseason games for? Evaluation. That's what they're about. They're not about winning. They're not about losing. They're just evaluation. You don't need overtime.
Right. So the big one is the automatic ejection rule. Basically, if you have 2 personal fouls in a game, it will turn into basically it will be turned into the NBA technical foul. If you have a personal foul and it's between one of the short list of infractions that they're going to pick from, which is fewer than 5, that will count as an ejection. If you get a second one, you are ejected automatically. So the soccer, whatever you want to call it, the getting the yellow card and getting the red card, the technical foul and then getting the other technical foul, whatever you want to call it, I think this is a great rule. I think it prohibits people from just committing dumb personal fouls. I think the face mask, you can't put that in there. Mm-hmm. I think you're in for a world of hurt if you do the face mask penalty in there. I think any kind of unsportsmanlike conduct that's the after the play variety, definitely, because that's what you need to kill, is the whole them hitting each other after the play stuff.
Yeah.
What could you think of the personal fouls that you would say, unsportsmanlike conduct, so you'd say, okay, this needs to be part of that?
Basically the ones you mentioned, anything to the quarterback that could definitely affect the quarterback from continuing on in the game, like lower legs.
The roughing the passer, I don't think you can do that.
No, not roughing the passer, but I think anything low in the lower legs. If you hit the quarterback below the knees, things like that. Now that is still roughing the passer, but I think it has to be a specific type of roughing the passer. You see where I'm coming from?
Right.
I'm not talking about...
Yeah, because that's the personal foul variety. That's not roughing the passer.
Exactly. Personal fouls in general. That's the way I look at it.
See, but the face mask is considered a personal foul. So, you can't... I don't think you can put that in there. But, yeah, I think anything else should be sort of grounds for it. I mean, if you're hitting players when you're not supposed to, you should get penalized, and that should be part of the thing, because, one player can get hot, another player, and it's basically, they're trying to keep from getting the Josh Norman and Odell Beckham thing. This is what this is for. It's the Josh Norman, Odell Beckham rule. Mm-hmm. So, I don't have a problem with if that's what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, I don't either, and even if to an extent taunting could be one, possibly, because, if a guy's staying in a guy's face and not leaving him alone, I mean, that you can take a quick, stop to that by doing this.
Yeah, I think that's a slippery slope, though, because then once you call one thing taunting and say it's the same player again, you call it again, and they're ejected, and it's just, I don't know. That was a little bit, but I agree. I can see where you're coming from there on that. But all right, I think we talked about that enough. Their free agent team is Russell Okung goes to the Broncos. 5-year deal. Fills Evan Mathis, who had gone to the Cardinals earlier. The Broncos have had plenty of players leaving, but they get one in return here.
Yeah, it's good, and it's really going to help them, I think, and kind of replenish them a little bit.
It's a 4-year deal. Russell Okung signs a 1-year, $5 million deal with the Broncos. That includes a 4-year, $48 million option. Wow, what a... Jeez.
Wow, so they're going to go with it and see what happens here, I guess. But yeah, I mean, this is good for them. They're going to need to replenish their team a little bit here, and this guy is definitely going to be able to help them. So I think it's good.
Yeah, I think this is a great move here for the Broncos. The Cowboys are going to get to keep Lance Dunbar.
Now, what kind of deal did he sign? A certain deal, or what's the news on him?
They're just saying that the Cowboys are going to re-sign him.
Okay.
It doesn't say right now.
We're seeing this a lot now, and that's why, because I had not heard the details.
I just hope that doesn't mean. I think if you don't go quarterback, I think you have to go running back with that first pick if you're not going quarterback, because maybe you don't if Bosa's there or something like that, but you have to go. Dunbar is not your every down back. Yeah.
No, you got McFadden right now at that point that you're going to have, but I agree with you, Sean. That's the sexy pick that all the Cowboy fans and Cowboy Nation are hoping. Elliott is that guy. They want him so very badly. But, experts are saying Bosa, which, he's a decent player. He's a good, he'll definitely stop the run, but not exactly your best pass rusher. But he's good, for what he does. So we'll see what that happens. But Dunbar as a player is good. The Cowboys had a lot of success with Dunbar. And I'm sure this deal is not really expensive for them, and it's probably a good deal. But I think this is a comfort thing. So this is good for the Cowboys.
I agree. I mean, Romo really likes using him. So, and I like the way the offense moves with Dunbar in there. So he adds a different dynamic, that they were missing last year when he got hurt. So definitely want to keep him. Chris Johnson signs deal with the Cardinals. Again, on another 1-year deal. David Johnson's better now. So at least you have somebody to come in for David Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is smart because of Chris Johnson's success. He kept his nose clean, didn't get any trouble. So I mean, once again, they're just kind of monitoring him. They don't want to get too in deep with him. So 1-year deal is a smart move on their part, and I think they'll get good production out of him.
Yeah, the Chicago Bears traded Martellus Bennett to the Patriots.
Man, what an intelligent move by the New England Patriots. And I question what the heck is Chicago doing because of the fact that we know Jay Cutler has had some rapport with Martellus Bennett. He's been one of their guys that have, kind of been a big key to that offense at times, catching some of those touchdown passes when, no one else could get open or, they needed to throw it up high and he could just jump up and get it. So it's amazing to me that they were willing to make a trade, but I mean, really, maybe they have other plans. Maybe they weren't all about Martellus Bennett, so.
Andre Smith signing with the Vikings. Mike Zimmer taking another one of his former Bengals.
Yeah, and this is, something we see on a normal basis. Honestly, when coaches coach in a certain, place and players that they know very well are available, they go get them. And, this is just another case of that.
Mike Wallace goes to the Ravens.
You know what? I mean, to me personally, this is not a bad decision. They've got some good receivers at some points, but I mean, Steve Smith, you got him, you got Aiken, and now Wallace. I think Wallace will be a great third, guy. So not a bad decision. Walls has not been exactly the picture of success. I think he's still a good receiver. I think in the right place, in the right position, he could be a good receiver. So we'll have to see if this is it.
So probably the big one that's happened since the last time we were doing the podcast, Chandler Jones traded to the Cardinals for Jonathan Cooper, an offensive lineman, and a second-round pick to the Patriots.
Wow. This is and once again, these Patriots, they are making wheeling and dealing moves here. But I mean, not a bad idea, for both teams. I think this is pretty good. So, I mean,
think this is the Patriots understanding that Jones is going to be a big deal, and they're not going to want to pay him, so they want to make sure they get something for him.
You're a smart man. You're exactly right, and I think that's smart on their part as well.
To get offensive line help, which they need.
They really do. So it works for both teams.
The Cardinals could not even get to Cam Newton last year. This is going to help with that, certainly. James Laurinaitis signs with the Saints. We'll get to hear Will talk about that in a little bit here, but glad to know that Animal's son will be playing again because he deserves to be. And I think this is a good fit for them. He can be the captain of their defense now. Yeah,
right back in a territory that, he may know well, the Mid-South. But looking at this, I just had to throw that out there. Wrestling term, people. Sorry. But, this is good. This is really good for the Saints defense. They need quality players, and this is a quality player, a leader, a guy that can really help them, and just a wonderful move.
Evan Mathis basically replaces Jonathan Cooper and goes to the Cardinals. 1-year deal from the Broncos. So that's good.
It is good. Once again, another decision that I think is going to help and be very, very important.
The Ravens possibly going to lose Will Hill, safety. They actually cut him because the NFL is going to slap him with a 10-game suspension for violating the league's substance abuse policy. Yikes.
Oof, and that's going to be exciting for any team that's going to want to sign him, huh? There may be teams out there who will wait it out, and I'm sure there will be somebody, but at the same point, man, you got to question a player that, that has to get suspended in the first place, right? So we'll see, but, he's probably lost himself a good chunk of change by doing this kind of thing.
Yeah, certainly. 2 Jets go sign somewhere. Demario Davis goes with the Browns, and Quentin Coples goes to the Rams. Pass rusher, so that helps with the loss of Chris Long, who also went to the Patriots. So,
yeah, Chris Long is a great player. He doesn't have a long-term motor. He has injury issues, but if he stays healthy, he's going to be a huge help to the Patriots.
Yeah, for sure. Donald Penn re-signs with the Raiders, and look out, guys, because the Raiders' offensive line could be rivaling the Cowboys' offensive line now.
The Raiders are just getting better and better and better. It's like watching a transformer being built in front of your eyes. This is just one of those deals where, they're making right decisions. They're just picking and choosing and doing all the right things. So by the end of this offseason, I'm going to be very curious to see, what Raiders team comes out of all this, and it's going to be pretty scary.
The Redskins signed Junior Gillette and Broncos safety David Bruton.
A few moves here that could be very helpful to their team.
And the Steelers take another lineman from the Broncos, Ryan Harris. So Broncos are just losing players like flies.
Wow, yeah, it is terrifying as a Broncos fan, I would be very nervous because you're losing just basically your some of your key pieces here. So they need to be careful and make sure they can replace these guys.
And one player that is staying, though, the Broncos decide to match the offer sheet to C.J. Anderson, and he stays with the Broncos.
Wow, and I was a little bit surprised by this. I really felt like they were going to let him go and find other, players to come in and, take that position. Because running back, as important it can be, sometimes it's one of the positions that really a lot of GMs kind of see as expendable. That, we can find somebody else. We can find somebody younger or somebody that has a similar skill set. But, this guy knows his team. He can be, a help to them. And I don't think it's a bad deal for them, for sure. But I'm just a little surprised they were, willing to pay the price.
I would say that Redskins, if Junior Gillette can actually stay healthy, he could be a pretty good pickup for them. Because obviously they tried to pick him up last year, and he had the torn Achilles. So, I will say that this is all on John Elway. Had he tendered C.J. Anderson correctly the first time, he wouldn't have had to overpay to keep C.J. Anderson. But that happened. So, yeah, John Elway. I guess you live and you learn.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much it. Nate Ebner is apparently leaving the Patriots so he can go play rugby in the Olympics.
Uh-oh.
That's cool. Yeah, because that's been added to the Olympics this year. So
wow, that's awesome.
You can play rugby sevens there now. So, yeah, well, that about does it for the news. Not, the huge free agent signings, whatever, but quite a few to go through. And now we're going to get into talking about the teams here. So we're going to start first with the New Orleans Saints. And last word on sports writer Will Cotchery will be the one covering the Saints for us here. This is about, he goes into the history. He talks about various things about this team. So we may not have a whole lot to talk about when we get done with this interview here. But here we go, about 23 minutes of Will talking about the Saints. All right, so I'm here doing the first recording of the interview here for the podcast, and with me is Last Word on Sports writer Will Cotchery. He is a New Orleans Saints fan, and how long have you been a Saints fan?
Well, I started off, it was interesting because my biological father, he was actually a longtime Packers fan. So, I used to support Brett Favre and just the team, Antonio Freeman, Ahmad Green, stuff of that nature. But once I moved to Louisiana in 1999, all of my family were obviously Saints homers. So, I just, every Sunday, my grandmother would be in front of the TV yelling louder than people in the actual stadium. So we used to always tell her that they can't hear you through the TV, but, that's how passionate she was. So, just kind of rubbed off on me. And just over the years, it's just grown, especially my stepfather. He's a diehard Saints fan. Jerseys everywhere. Just signed footballs, autographs everywhere. So it was just a lovely team to be a part of.
So, do you feel like any allegiance toward the Packers at all still, or?
Not at all. It's kind of disintegrated over the years. Although I do respect what they've done with Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCartney, I'm all Saints now.
Right. So, looking back at this season that was in 2015, what stands out for you from that season?
Well, once again, it was another disappointing year. Not as disappointing as the 2014 year, because that season we were actually coming off a second-round exit from the eventual Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. So, but going back to the 2015 season, it was another downfall year, another year older with these guys. It shows that you have to continue to draft well. And when you draft well, you have years like we had from 2006 to 2012. And when you don't draft well, when you don't hit on these picks, you have like years from 2014 to 2015. Offensively, we started off pretty slow, especially in the Arizona game. Although they were a playoff team, we just weren't clicking on all cylinders. But especially during the Giants game, we started to catch our fire in the Indianapolis game. So, once again, we finished top 5 in offense. The only time we've failed to finish top 5 in offense as a franchise was 2010. I think that year we actually finished number 6 in the league. So I'm pretty satisfied with where we're going, especially with our young receiving core and Brandon Cooks, Brandon Coleman, Willie Snead. I think that's a nice trio to build on. Defensively, once again, it was just another horrible year. 2012, we set the league record with the worst defense ever as far as total yards is concerned. And in 2014, it was more of the same in that regard. And it was a disappointing fall because in 2013, we were number 4 in defense, and that was one of our best units on that side of the football in the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era. So when you continue to fall and decrease in value like that, it's a rough sign, and it's a tough thing to see. So I'm just looking forward to this offseason, all the more moves we're going to make, and because we really need to get this turned around because Drew Brees is he's on the shorter side of his career, even though he can still play at a very high level. We just want to maximize his opportunities for him.
So what do you think happened there with the defense? Like, how did it just disintegrate like that from 2 years on? Your defense just falls right back down again.
Well, here's the thing, and when we won the Super Bowl in 2009, we had an outstanding pass rush with Will Smith and just everybody pitching in on to get pressure on the quarterback. Not only were we able to get pressure on the quarterback, we were able to create turnovers. We actually led the league with 39 takeaways that season. And Darren Sharper's really spearheaded the defense, especially in the secondary, with 9 interceptions and the handful of touchdowns he had. Tracy Porter, he really stepped up, especially in the playoffs. He was tremendous in the playoffs and his colossal plays, and especially in the NFC Championship game against Brett Favre, when he caught the pick to help us push it to overtime. And then, of course, in the Super Bowl, picking off Peyton Manning to seal the deal for us for our first ever championship in the league. And 2013, fast forward 4 years later to 2013, even though we didn't get the interception numbers like we did in the past, we were still able to get pressure on the quarterback. Cam Jordan, year 3, he had 12.5 sacks during his first Pro Bowl bid. And Junior Gillette, who I thought was a Pro Bowl snub that year, he actually wrote a story about Pro Bowl snubs. I do an annual series on that, by the way. That was my first time doing it. I forgot the number he came in, but he was definitely on the list with 12 sacks of his own right. So when you have 24.5 sacks between two guys, that helps out the pass rush. So it is several things that continue to go wrong. Historically, even with our better defenses, we falter in the secondary. I can actually give you a long list of guys we've had at cornerback since 2006. We have Fred Thomas, Jason Davis. That was like the worst off-season signing ever. I think because he was coming off a 2006 championship team with the Indianapolis Colts. So at that time, they were really specialized in the cover 2 defense, where you rush 4 guys with featured Robert Mathis and Dwight Freeney. So all he had to do was just play in his zone, play his area, and control everything that came to him. So in his tenure with us, in his 3 years, it was just awful. And he used to get torched all the time. Now, looking back on it, I think it was the scheme, because historically, New Orleans, we run a man-press cover scheme. So you need guys who could really take away the receivers on the outside and on the perimeter. And he just couldn't do that for us. We fast forward to Mike McKenzie, who was also in the early regime with Sean Payton and Drew Brees. He definitely made some flashes, was our best quarterback for a while. And you go to Tracy Porter and Jabari Greer, who won the Super Bowl with us. Both of those guys held it down for a little while. Once again, had their flashes, but no longer on the roster. And now you have Keenan Lewis and guys like Delvin Breaux, who actually had an outstanding season as a rookie, even though he's a 25-year-old rookie at the time. This past season, he was actually one of the top 10 cornerbacks according to Pro Football Focus. So, especially during his excellent performance against Julio Jones on Thursday night. So we definitely have promise at the position. And then we're also getting P.J. Williams back, who was the defensive MVP for the Florida State Seminoles on their championship run in 2013, after he had 7 tackles and an interception in that championship game. So we definitely have the pieces in place at the cornerback position. I know a lot of people say we need a cornerback in this draft, especially with our pass falters. And, yeah, we have struggled religiously at that position, but I feel like if these guys could come back healthy and just mesh together, I think that will take off huge pressure from the defensive line. But and another reason is just we just can't. Speaking of defensive line, we just can't get pressure on the quarterback. We can't stop the run. We can't do nothing. Actually, wrote in our top 3 draft needs for the Saints a few weeks back. I said anybody with a pulse, any big man, oversized, overlarge man with a pulse would help. It would instantly upgrade our defensive front. So, if we can really get, if we could bolster up our defensive line, it'll go a long way for us.
So you also, are going through a scheme change once again with Rob Ryan fired in the middle of the season. You bring in somebody that was already there. You're retaining him for the next year. Do you feel different now about the defense without Rob Ryan there? Was he really the negative?
Well, the thing is, Rob Ryan's always been a flash in the pan in my perspective. I know he had some strong years in Dallas, and he started off great with us. I think it's a mixture of his scheme being too complex with the players. I know players have complained in the past about him being too complex, so they have to simplify it. I think for the most part, at the end of the day, they need to get the better players that's going to produce regardless of the system that's put in place. I know Dennis Allen, he's been upgraded as a D coordinator from what I hear. So, he's been known to be more technically sound. I know he didn't have the greatest time in Oakland as a coach, but because some guys are just better coordinators anyway. So I just hope they can get these guys turned around. But I think, like I said, it's just a mixture of things. I think mostly it's just the players. I think Rob Ryan was just seen as a scapegoat, especially after that Philadelphia loss and then the Washington loss.
Yeah, that's a nice. That's a different take than you get. Most people will sit there and just want to ride on the coach until they can't anymore. It's refreshing to hear somebody actually say, "Hey, the players might be a reason why our defense sucks right now."
Well, at the end of the day, and you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, you have to have the players that play. I know college. I've always looked at college collegiate sports is more of a coaching thing because these coaches recruit the players. They have to coach the players. I look at it, perfect example in college basketball. A lot of people criticize John Calipari for getting these one-and-done players. But at the end of the day, you have to look at these guys go to the Final Four, Elite Eight, Sweet 16 every year. So you look at my school, LSU, at Johnny Jones. He got the number 1 player in the country in Ben Simmons, and he has another top player, Antonio Blakeney, and they just couldn't get it done. They couldn't even get to the tournament. So that proves that you got to coach these guys up. Now, as far as the professional ranks, we have outstanding coaches, but you have to get the players to do what you need them to do. Like Sean Payton, he got a quarterback in Drew Brees who can fit his system and who can lead his offense and lead this franchise. Has been successful for the better part of a decade. So yeah, it's just, at some point the players have to step up and take ownership into their craft and get better and move forward. If they don't, they'll be kicked off the team. It is plain and simple.
So, today marks the actual 10th anniversary of when Drew Brees agreed to join the Saints, and
Right.
A lot was made of last year with the injuries and just having to come out of games at times. That twilight starting to hit for Drew Brees, even though he did almost get 5,000 yards again. How many years do you really think he has left?
That's been a burning question the last couple of off seasons. Personally, I would say maybe 2. I think 3 is the ultimate ceiling. I know, he jokingly said he wanted to play till he was 45, and I remember he said that 2 off seasons ago because we were coming off the playoff run. Everybody was feeling good about themselves. I personally can't stand off season talk like that. It's good to be confident, but you have to be sensible and smart about what you're saying. But anyway, going back to the point. I still think because he's an elite quarterback, I think you can make do with him even longer, especially like Tom Brady, who's only had 1 major injury in his career, and he's been consistently healthy throughout the rest of it. So we've been really fortunate. I think best case scenario would be 2 to 3 years. I don't want to be unrealistic and say 5 to 8 because I'm not saying that's happening because guys don't just play in quarterbacks don't play into their 40s usually.
I mean, the way they're going with wanting to make more rules about protecting the quarterbacks. You never know at this point. They could
Right,
just,
exactly.
we joke around on the podcast a lot that maybe they'll just have the quarterback start playing flag football and everybody else will just be tackling.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised because that's where the game is going. Because these guys are the money makers in this league. And obviously, because they play the toughest position, especially from a technicality standpoint. Excuse me. They play the toughest position in the game. So, it's unfortunate for defensive players. That's why I have more respect for defensive players who dominate and defensive teams that dominate in this day and age. Because I've actually said in the past that the 2013 Seattle Seahawks was the best defense in NFL history in terms of because they didn't have to play because even though we have teams like the 2000 Ravens, the 02 Bucks, and the 85 Bears, which I have immense respect for, they didn't have to play in the modern day NFL. At those times, respectively, the defense was the focal point of the league. Now, when you have offenses as the focal point of the league, you have to have cornerbacks who can take away these guys and can play clean and without being penalized. And the Seattle Seahawks were excellent at that. And even going to this year with the Denver Broncos, congratulations to them. They had a pass rush that helped them out. Of course, they had stars in the secondary, but the pass rush really propelled them to a championship.
So, you made mention earlier of having that young core of receivers that you have now. You added a young Kobe Fleener to that with a 5-year deal. And, that was your big offensive signing, at least for now. So what do you think he brings to your offense? Obviously, losing Jimmy Graham, you may do with Ben Watson performing incredibly well last year. And now you get somebody that's supposed to sort of be in that mold of your lead tight end that you're going to be looking to pass to.
Yeah, and first off, I was a little shocked and disappointed that Ben Watson signed with the Ravens, but he deserved his contract. Yeah, but he was coming off his best year statistically, especially as a pass catcher is concerned. But yeah, when you bring in a guy like Kobe Fleener, who played alongside Dwayne Allen for the last several years in Indianapolis Colts. I actually have one of my best friends. He was actually a former writer of last year. He's a huge Colts fan. So we used to watch these guys play all the time. And, he's going to bring like size and athleticism just to help eat up that middle of the field and just to bring attention from the linebackers. I know a lot of worders out there that he can't block, but even though he can, you have to put him in a position to where he's a receiver. I know, especially Jimmy Graham got huge scrutiny over his lack of blocking ability. And it's been evident, but you have to understand, especially if you're the Seattle Seahawks who traded for him, you have to put this guy in a position to where he can succeed in the passing game. That's what the same thing we have to do with Kobe Fleener. So we've had successful tight ends from Jeremy Shockey, to, like you said, Jimmy Graham, to Ben Watson, to now Kobe Fleener. So I'm just excited to see what they're going to do, especially when you have the receivers on the outside who's going to demand attention the older they get. I think it's going to bode well for everybody.
And then just I think earlier today you make the big signing defensively. You'd already brought in sort of a journeyman linebacker and Nate Supar, and then today they make the signing of James Laurinaitis, and
right.
The leading Rams tackler ever. I mean, he still had a terrific year last year, even though it was sort of down from previous years. I mean, are you excited to see him come to your team? A lot of people were saying, "Oh, he's hitting that mark where he's gonna pass the prime, all that." Do you believe that, or you think he's still really gonna help your team here?
Well, I'm very excited about the signing. I was actually surprised that St. Louis, and now known as the Los Angeles Rams, I was really surprised that they let him go despite his age, because even though he's 29 years old, he's had 100-plus tackles in each of his 7 seasons in the league. So that's just a model of consistency, especially yet to miss a game, yet to miss a snap. So now, although, he hasn't made any Pro Bowls, and he doesn't have the accolades or what have you, but consistency like that brings value to any team, especially the leadership, because he's so experienced. I think it's going to help out guys like Stephon Anthony and Haloi Kakaha and guys of that nature. We need veteran leadership. And if we can continue the trend of hitting on these inside linebackers, because in 2008 we signed Jonathan Vilma, who was like in his first 2 years with the New York Jets, he was outstanding, one of the more talented young defensive players in the game. So because of his injury history, we were able to get him at a bargain. And then when you look at a few years later, we got Curtis Lofton, who's another excellent guy who played in Atlanta for several years, one of the leading tacklers in the game during his tenure with the Falcons. And now if we could continue this trend with the veteran leadership in James Laurinaitis, I think it'll bring a huge boost to our defense. So I'm very excited about the signing.
So looking into, I mean, you already made mention of some of the, things you need, a defensive end, secondary help. Anything else that you think you really need to hit on in that draft there?
Well, just going back to, I think really, like I said earlier, the biggest thing is defensive lineman, whether it's a run stopper or like a full clogger inside or just a pass rusher. The Saints really need to go after a guy like, let's say, Ashawn Robinson, who I'm an LSU guy, so I see Alabama play all the time. I think Ashawn Robinson would be ideal there. Robert Kendichi, as far as like talent and athleticism, he's superb. But like I just never was big on getting guys who had character issues. And of course, his lack of consistency during his Ole Miss career, and of course, Sheldon Rankins from Louisville. We just have to get somebody who can bring pressure on the defensive line. As cornerback, like I said, we just need to be healthy at that position. Hopefully, P.J. Williams can grow up fast. I know that he didn't play in his rookie season, but going into year 2, learning from veterans like Keenan Lewis, I think that will help him out big time. Now, earlier, several days ago, like a week ago, I was looking at the wide receiver position momentarily. Now, although I'm pretty confident in the growth of Brandon Cooks, Willie Snead, and Brandon Coleman, the budding trio there, if you wanted to get like a free agent, I was originally said Mohamed Sanu before he signed with our rival Atlanta Falcons, because I was really a fan of him in Cincinnati, although his production on paper dropped down. When you playing with A.J. Green and Marvin Jones and Tyler Eifert and Giovanni Bernard, you're just going to be squeezed out of that mold. So I really wanted the Saints to get him before he signed. So congratulations on him and his contract, first of all. But I was looking at guys like Ruben Randall, but if we don't get a receiver, I'm fine with that. Now, in terms of the draft, getting a receiver, maybe we can get Laquan Treadwell at our first-round pick. I know some mock drafts have us getting him, but it might remind me of the Odell Beckham selection by the Giants a couple of years back. So, yes, he's the most electrifying receiver in the game as we speak right now, but their defense is still horrible. So as a team, you have to really outweigh or balance or think about do you want to draft on need or do you want to draft on best player available? I've always been a person in the past that you got to get the best person available. I mean, you have to address your draft needs because that's what the draft is for. So I think I wouldn't lose sleep over us not getting Laquan Treadwell because I think the defense, they really have to address it in the first 2 rounds.
So you would say go with that D lineman for that 12th pick then?
Absolutely. We need some pop at that defensive line and that defensive unit. We need an instant impact player. Yeah, I think Ashawn Robinson or Sheldon Rankins, they fit the mold there.
Well, so looking at, let's say you fast forward now to training camp, the off-season part, all the moves and stuff, it's over with. You would call it a successful off-season for you if you did what 3 things?
Well, just going back to the draft, first off, we have to get the defensive players. And then next, go also second in the draft as far as going back to the offensive side, I would like us to get another guard. I actually put that in one of our number 3 need during our series of top 3 draft needs and off-season needs. I think we give Vidal Alexander out of LSU in the 2nd or 3rd round as a homegrown guy who can really be plugged in. I know Andrew Speed is currently plugged in at the left guard position, but I think eventually he's going to be moved to tackle, especially with Zach Street with his better days behind him. And I think really the number 3, maybe the most important, we have to stay healthy. Because you could talk about championship runs all you want, but if you're not healthy, it's wasted. You see what I'm saying? I think we just need to maintain our health. Because Carolina, at the end of the day, they're the class of the division. Best Carolina Panthers team I've ever seen, 15-1 historic run. They're the class of the division. They won the division 3 straight years. because last year in 2014 they became the first team in the NFC South history to repeat the division. So especially making a three-peat now, they're just a class of the division. And I think right now it's just a three-team race. And I think if we could get it act together on defense, I think we'd be in great shape.
All right. Well, I think you answered all of our questions here. I want to thank you for helping us out.
Oh, anytime to help the brand. You know, we're in this together, and I'm just honored for you to even ask me about it. I had to jump on the opportunity, so I want to thank you for it also.
Well, I appreciate it, man. You did awesome. So, you're of course welcome back anytime. So.
Oh, I'll be back. Trust me, I'll be back. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be doing sort of another one of these kind of things when the draft is over, so everybody can kind of look at their team, post-draft. So we'll be hitting you up pretty soon there.
Oh, yeah, I'll be ready.
All right, well, that was Will Cotchery talking about his Saints. Gary, like I said, he was pretty thorough. So.
Yeah, he's a Saints encyclopedia, and which is great. I love it. I think he did a wonderful job covering his team, and really gave you a breakdown there of success, past successes, why they were successful at one time, where they failed, and he just kind of spells it all out. And I think he is correct when he talks about defense being an important part. Really, honestly, offensively, Drew Brees is kind of like Tom Brady in a way. They find ways to win. They just do. They're such great, talented quarterbacks. You give them a few pieces. They may not be the biggest or most shiniest pieces, but they'll make them golden quickly. But you got to get some help for them by getting a better defense together. And, he was kind of touching on a few things. I think pass rush is definitely a huge thing for them. I think that's one thing they're going to have to for sure work on, build that back up, and, of course, work on that secondary. I thought it was very interesting that he feels like the secondary is already there. That's a surprise for me because I still don't know if I'm trustworthy of him. But, he follows him pretty closely. He may know something I don't.
Yeah, I would have said that too. I think, the other receiver is an interesting thing that I think you can maybe get in a third or fourth round or something like that. Offensive line was an issue. For me, I think you do have to go with the pass rusher first. It's really hard for me not to tell somebody to go, oh, Laquan Treadwell's there, don't take him. Mm-hmm. I would almost go best player available if you're the Saints and he's there at 12, Laquan Treadwell. You know what he's going to do for your offense. That gives you that solid guy that, let's be honest, for a while Marcus Colston was that guy for Drew Brees. Then he got older and then he started kind of going to the shorter, quicker receivers. And they do have a nice core there, but if you get Treadwell at that spot, I think you kind of have to take him if he's there. If he's already taken, then I think you take the defensive end that's around there. If there's a better corner than that defensive end, I think you take the corner. You definitely need that secondary does need help. I'd agree with him that necessarily you might have some guys that you're hoping for, like a P.J. Williams that didn't really play last year, but that secondary has been a big issue for them for a while, as he notes. And sometimes you can get those coverage sacks. You can if you're covering them, and you're making it to where those receivers are having to play tough. Look at here. You're playing Julio Jones now twice a year. You're going to be playing Kelvin Benjamin twice a year. You got Mike Evans twice a year. I mean, that's just in your division. Mm-hmm. So you've got elite receivers that you have to deal with, and I mean, I don't know that it's certainly Julio Jones the lead. I don't know that you've got at least pretty good receivers, and you've got to deal with them. And the best way to deal with them is to have a corner that can, if not lock them down, at least with some safety help, can control them a little bit. And these offensive lines for these teams are only going to get better. The Panthers already had a great one. I mean, the Bucks is going to get better. The Falcons is going to get better. They're going to be able to control some of the pass rushing, but if you're able to keep some of these receivers in check, that gives the pass rush that you do have more time. So, I don't know. Any other thoughts for you on that?
No, I mean, I think we pretty much covered, the basics of it, and I think he did a pretty good job himself, so I don't think we have to go any further.
And I think Kobe Fleener is going to be such an addition to that team offensively. I don't know about in the blocking, obviously, but you've got guys. You've got a Josh Hill there that can do that for you, and then you can come and have Fleener be what Graham was, what Ben Watson was for you. Not in the same type, obviously not the same type of player, but just to be able to be out there and catch the ball when Drew Brees needs him. And, he loves those tight ends. So.
Definitely.
All right. Well, we move on now to the Atlanta Falcons, and this is a guy that kind of came from a friend of a friend, Tre Reed. He is born and bred in Atlanta, so he is all about his Falcons. 17 minutes here, him talking about the Falcons here, and then we'll be back to kind of discuss some of the moves and everything, and that'll be it. Here we go. All right, I'm here for the second interview of the podcast tonight, and with me here is Atlanta Falcons fan Tre Reed. Tre, how are things going?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing pretty good. So, how long have you been a Falcons fan?
I was born and raised, man.
All right. Well, the best kind. There you go. So you've been fan. Do you have any first memories or anything?
Yeah. The first real memory I have was probably when I was about 8 years old, around there, and my mom took me to a Super Bowl party when the Super Bowl was in Atlanta, and I met then Falcons defensive lineman Lincoln Kennedy. And I just remember how big the guy was. I mean, he's a monster, especially to me. I'm 8 years old. And then my father, he worked security at the Georgia Dome, so every so often I get to go, stand by the tunnel when the Falcons would come out. And I could just stay on the field for the most part and watch the games. That's back when Andre Rison and Deion Sanders and all them were playing for the Falcons.
That's pretty cool. Well, looking at this season that passed, pretty weird season. Go undefeated and then you just lose a bunch of games straight, and just certainly not the way you thought it would end up. What do you think of when you think of last season?
I want to forget it for the most part. I mean, I know we ended up 8-8, but the way it started out to go, win as many games as we did in a row to start things off. I mean, essentially we won the NFC East by beating the Cowboys and the Giants and all of them. But when it came to games that seemed to have mattered, we didn't do a whole lot of anything. And, that was disturbing for me to watch. Because, like I said, I've been growing up watching these guys, and for the last, 7 or 8 years since Matt Ryan's been quarterback, we've been a pretty consistently good team. And so watching them just, for lack of a better term, crap the bed the way they did against teams they should have just not annihilated, but, beat in general, it was puzzling at best.
So, speaking of Matt Ryan, I mean, he kind of came under fire last year because of the way the team played, obviously. Do you put that? Do you put that on Matt Ryan a lot, or what do you think is the reason?
There's no doubt that Matt Ryan, he made dumb choices, but I think in general, especially from an offensive standpoint, it was a team effort to screw things up as much as they did. Our O-line was horrible for a long time. And then it seems like for whatever reason, the offense forgot to be an offense. we've been a pretty consistent, high-powered offense with guys like Julio Jones and Roddy White out there. Matt Ryan could put up 250, 300 yards a game, but it just seemed they couldn't keep him off his back long enough for him to do anything.
Yeah, fair enough. That was a big issue for them as far, Matt Ryan was going down constantly. And another thing was Roddy White was not playing to what you expect him to, at least the way he's played in previous seasons, to the point where the team released him. And, now he feels like he still has a couple years to play and all that. And there's talk of him possibly going inside the division to kind of stay around that area, obviously. But do you feel like the team was right in dropping Roddy?
I don't think they were right, especially the fact they go out and sign Mohamed Sanu for as much as they did. I thought Roddy had plenty left in him. They didn't use him a whole lot last year. Supposedly him and the defensive coordinator had a lot of, I guess you'd say, beef, and they just didn't get along. And that showed on the field. And unfortunately, that just sucks from a fan standpoint, because people in Atlanta, they love Roddy, and I'm one of them. Roddy's a great player. He's a great personality to have on a team. He's a veteran. He's been in this league for a long time, and he knows what he's doing, and he does it well. That just sucks to see him go out the way he did.
So do you put that more on Shanahan then, and not necessarily on Roddy for last season?
Yeah, because if you look at Roddy's record, he's been consistent with his production, the amount of catches, his yards after catch, things like that. Roddy's never shown any kind of signs of being inconsistent. But last year, you can see where Shanahan essentially phased him out of the offense.
Yeah, true. They were having, I think Leonard Hankerson would get the ball more. Even, Hardy came in towards the end of the season, so
yeah.
There was times where he was just totally invisible. It felt.
Yeah. And Hankerson didn't even make it to the end of the season.
Right.
They just cut him.
So, you mentioned Sanu already. Putting the money aside, how do you feel about the signing?
I'm a very patient fan. I think I'm willing to give him a chance, see what he can go out and produce. I think he had a lot covered him up in Cincinnati. But I think here, if he's going to be the number 2 receiver, well, we got the quarterback, we got Julio, we got Devontae Freeman, we've got the offense that he can work with and become a solid number 2. And if he can, then he can put up the numbers that hopefully warrants the money they gave him.
So you mentioned the offensive line having issues, and the team went out and signed Alex Mack from the Browns. Do you really think he's going to be what bolsters your line there at center?
And I can tell you, again, as a Falcons fan, our offensive line has always been a question mark at best ever since I was a kid. And bringing in a guy like Alex Mack, hopefully, at the very least, his leadership potential can help make the guys around him better. And again, keep Matt Ryan up on his feet and off his back. The guy's been to 3 Pro Bowls, so there's something to say about that. He's worked with Shanahan, and he knows the offense, and he knows the system that he's going to be in. And again, I think that works in his favor. So, do I think it's going to be a good thing? Yeah, I'm fairly confident in it, but you just NFL, you never know when somebody's going to do something silly.
You're right about that. There's so many players that you thought, oh, they'll be fine, and then they do something crazy, and that's what hurts them more than anything else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, on the defensive end, which is where the team you'd say had problems previously, they sort of improved under, obviously the new coach who's more defensive minded. That you bring back Sean Witherspoon. You also sign Derek Shelby from the Dolphins and bring back Adrian Claiborne. So you're improving that line that still had issues rushing the ball or rushing the passer. Do you think that's your biggest need going into this offseason now, or is there still something that you think needs filled?
I think we're solid at cornerback with Trufant out there. Our biggest needs are the linebacker core and the defensive line because our pass rush has been horrible for years. It stuck out ever since about 2011, 2012, whenever Green Bay came into the Georgia Dome and Aaron Rodgers just tore them apart because we couldn't get any pressure on the guy. And ever since then, it's never, ever been anything that we can work with. Bringing in guys like, I like Sean Witherspoon. I liked him when we drafted him. I liked him when he was here. The only bad thing about Sean Witherspoon is he was always hurt. You can't produce anything on the field if you're always hurt.
Right.
If we can get production out of him, hey, that's fantastic. And I'll take it. Guys like Paul Warlow, and Paul Warlow is a guy who's, he's a workhorse. He grinds it out. He's nothing flashy. He's nothing special. And people aren't going to, hey, it's Paul Warlow. He's not a household name across the nation, but he's a good linebacker. And then you got Vic Beasley on the end who needs somebody on the other end or somebody along that line to help him out because Vic Beasley's a talented kid. And he's fast as all get out. But he can't do anything when he's got double teams on him and, everybody's working that line to go to Vic Beasley.
Do you think Shelby will help in that regard, or?
Well, I sure hope so. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about Shelby. I know that he's been a fairly consistent guy with the Dolphins. He was never the highlight of their defense or anything like that. But, again, I won't know a whole lot about him until I actually see what he could do.
Right. So when you're looking draft-wise, do you have ideas of where you want the team to go?
Along the lines, either offensive or defensive, it doesn't make much difference to me. I think Thomas Dimitroff, he's never been big on, it seems, that focusing on the line. He's been a more of a skilled players kind of guy when it comes to draft as far as the general manager aspect goes. He'll draft, running backs, wide receivers, cornerbacks, things like that. And that's probably one of the big reasons our lines are the way they are because of the way he drafts. And if we can build through the draft, then that'd be outstanding because that's the best way. If you look at teams like the Patriots and teams like Denver, they build their lines through the draft, and that's what Atlanta needs to do to be successful in the NFC South, if not the whole NFL itself.
That's so weird that a GM would think that way, considering that it's kind of been this staple for many years now that's kind of what you do. You ground yourself in your lines, and everything else will come if you have that set. Has he said why he has this mindset of not building with the lines, or?
I've never heard him say anything as far as that goes. Thomas Dimitroff has always been kind of like, this is my choice. You guys are going to like it. You don't like it, tough crap. And he gets who he wants, and that's who he wants. And we deal with it that way. And the fans notice that, the Georgia Dome sold out for the most part every Sunday that they're there. You got 75,000 people. The majority of them are paying attention to what the team's doing. And that's why when Mike Smith got fired, there was an uproar in Atlanta. It's like, why isn't Thomas Dimitroff gone with him? Because he's put this team in the position it's in now to where we're not winning anything. And so the fact that he's still here and we've got two other guys that were former GMs now on the staff, the fans in Atlanta are wondering what is going on with it.
Yeah, that's weird too. Normally they do kind of go hand in hand unless the GM didn't pick the coach. So sometimes they give him that little reprieve. But, man, so when you so you're saying go lines, that kind of makes sense to me. Just with the Falcons moving ahead, when you're looking back at this offseason, you say it was a successful offseason because you did what three things?
I'd say it's a successful offseason because, number one, you addressed the offensive line when bringing Alex Mack. that was obviously your most glaring hole, because we had a center before Alex Mack came in that couldn't even get the ball to Matt Ryan. Like, come on, man, it's your only job. So they bring in one of the best guys, one of those solid guys in the NFL that can do that. Another is shoring up, depth on the defensive line. And I think that needs to be addressed, as well as the wide receiver position. Because I don't think Hardy's ready for the number 2 spot, whereas Sanu can come in, at least, bolster that position until we can find something solid in the end.
What do you think of 1 year under? Obviously, you had the weird year last year, but are you excited with the team under Dan Quinn? How do you feel about that going forward?
As far as I can see, I like Dan Quinn as a coach. I think he brings good energy to the team. 8-8 record. He's working with what he's got, and we, again, fans of Atlanta, we notice what the staff is, we notice what the roster is, and we know Dan Quinn's out there doing what he can. I don't think we'll really have a clear perception of what Dan Quinn has achieved in Atlanta, at least for a couple of years, when he can get some draft classes in here, and he has a huge input on the draft itself, and just see what kind of guys he brings in and see how they pan, if they're going to have like defense like they did in Seattle with the Legion of Boom, or what we're going to have now here. Once we get another year or two into what Dan Quinn's done, I think we'll be able to get a better picture of him overall as a coach.
Fair enough. I've always been one that I agree with you in that Matt Ryan may have had some of the pieces, until last year. You could say maybe they didn't have the running game. Now they didn't have the offensive line last year. Let's say that, now you have everything sort of in place. You still have to, we don't know. Sanu's sort of an unknown considering what offense he came out of. But do you think Matt Ryan is the guy that could take you all the way to the Super Bowl if those things are in place?
I have no doubt in Matt Ryan. I mean, you're talking about one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. I'm not saying he's Brady, and I'm not saying he's Manning. But if anything, Matt Ryan is consistent in that. You're talking about a guy who puts up, at least 3,000 yards a season, and has since he's gotten into the NFL. And his touchdown to interception ratio has never been anything that's like, oh my God, he's throwing all these picks. Last year being 7, he threw a lot of picks last year, a lot of dumb picks. I remember I was in the stadium when they were playing Minnesota, and he threw a interception right there. I think they're probably about the 5 or 10 yard line. He threw one in the end zone. Just there's no one around, man. Why are you throwing it over there? So I think he had a fallback last year. But I mean, overall, Matt Ryan, I think he's a solid quarterback. He knows what he's doing out there. He's intelligent, and he can lead that offense the way it needs to be led.
All right, Trey, I think you answered all of our questions here. Thank you for helping us out. We'll be doing another one of these like around after the draft, so people can kind of assess their teams after you've had sort of the full off-season look at it. So we'll be getting in touch again.
That sounds good.
Just want to say thank you again, sir, and
no problem.
Hope you have a good night.
All right, thank you for having me on.
All right, well, that was... Oops. All right, that was Tre with his look at the Falcons. Falcons certainly have made a lot of moves in this offseason. He mentions Alex Mack. That was huge need for them that was able to be corrected. I still think you not want to go look more into that offensive line in the draft. But at least they covered that need.
Yeah, and most NFL teams at this point in free agency are trying to do just that, fill some of their needs, kind of set themselves up for the draft. That way they can either know what they need to get out of the draft, or maybe they don't feel like that they have to get a bunch of different guys in certain positions. Maybe they feel some needs to where they could just pick who they feel is the best available. So either system, can work for various teams, but that's exactly why they did this. They got Mack in here, kind of feel like they're shoring up the offensive line. That they probably will try to do more of that into the draft, and I think they will. But we'll have to see what priority they put on their first pick and second pick, and from there on. So I mean, it's solid and it's a good idea. The defensive line and offensive line is very important to these franchises, and all 32 teams are going to be looking heavily at those positions, especially offensive line. I've said it over and over again. No matter how good the team is, they're going to look at offensive line and make sure that they don't miss out on a guy that could help their franchise for years to come. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Falcons do.
Yeah, it is. Certainly, Derek Shelby helping out with that defensive line. I mean, he was very solid for the Dolphins last year. I mean, he still got about 3.5, 4 sacks for them. But that's also with an incredible line they already had. So this is going to be his time to show he can get the pass rush going on his own, which is, going to be an issue for him. I love the grab of Mohamed Sanu. How do you feel about I know we kind of talked about it last week or on the previous show, but he was very against the Roddy White release.
And I can't blame him. When a guy becomes a fan favorite, it's hard to see him go. It really is. I've dealt with it. You've dealt with it. It's just tough to see some of your favorite players leave and go, and especially if you bought their jerseys. I'm sure that a lot of those fans in Atlanta bought Roddy White jerseys, and now they're just going to be, collecting dust in the closet because of the situation. So it is definitely a bummer for, those guys. And I think that, Roddy White had shown that he had, a few struggles, and if he didn't get along with the coach, maybe it's not a good fit for him. Maybe it's time for him to move on with his career and find a place that feels like he is an asset, that feels like they can use him in a better way. So I think this is not all bad, for him.
Yeah, I mean, usually if the team likes a certain coach and you have a problem with that coach and he's the guy that's in charge of you or, is the one that deals with your position, then they're usually going to pick the coach over you, especially if you're towards that tail end or towards the past the prime point where they feel like, well, last year you really didn't help us, even though, yes, you can make a case that there was times where he wasn't even throwing the ball. But still, I mean, you weren't producing, and they felt like it was a better thing to keep Shanahan than keep you. And they went and got Sanu, and they feel like he can fit that part. That's another guy that he will benefit from being in the system that he was in, as Tre notes. And he's going to be interesting to see if he can really come out with the Falcons or not. Do you think he can? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I think he'll have some success. Now, I'm not sold that he's going to have just a brilliant year next year and everybody's going to be talking about him and he's going to be a fantasy darling. I think he'll be a serviceable player. I think he'll definitely, get things going for them. I think he'll make things a little bit easier on, on their team when it comes to, maybe, being more productive. Because I think at times Roddy White just couldn't do it for some reason. And maybe it was scheme, maybe it was other reasons. But some reason it just seemed to at times have to, too many struggles. So I think, potentially he's going to be a more consistent player.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think we kind of talked about everything here, and Tre covered the rest. So that's going to do it here for this episode of the Football to the Max. We'll be back on a Monday night, Tuesday morning, talking about that second and third round of March Madness. And then we'll also be continuing our series. We'll be going into the NFC North at this point. And for sure, I'll have probably the Packers. I'll have to look into whether I get the Lions or the Vikings, depending on who answers. And then we'll be doing the Bears and the other team on Thursday. So that'll be the lineup for next week as far as the teams that are being covered. And, of course, we'll continue to cover the news as it comes out. I'm sure they'll have the whatever rule changes were done and all that stuff figured out by then. And, of course, Hopefully Randy will be back with us on Monday with whatever his issues were. He's got it settled, and we'll be good to go. So, hopefully, if you've enjoyed the show, you can subscribe or rate and review on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever else you listen to the podcast. Of course, we have our own feed, or you can go go subscribe to the WTM Network feed, which of course brings you other podcasts that Gary and I do, or that I do, or that I do with other people, or Randy does. He has this Backlog Busting, which I guest on this week, talking about Kingdom Hearts and doing a little bit of the podcast with them. They also talked about Battle Block Theater, and I can't remember what Randy's game is right now. Oh, Randy talked about Unravel. So go check that out, of course. Whenever it releases, I'll put it on the feed, and you can listen to it that way. And, of course, we just did the Rest of the Max podcast, which is our flagship. You can hear us, of course, break down all the shows that happen on American Wrestling TV, and the news has been going on, and our big topic, which was the McMahon, Vince and Vince Jr., and how they actually parallel each other in the twilight of their careers as promoters. And so, we've got that. We got the video game podcast as well, the Video Games to the Max. And, and of course also thank you to Last Word on Sports again for being partnered with us. And, Will Cotchery, a terrific writer there, one of the many terrific writers that they have there. We're just privileged to kind of be part of the team, and we'll have to see how this further goes. But, until Monday night, Tuesday morning, we'll be back with you then. Later, everybody.